It is possible to become free from debt, financial worry, your boss, and your zip code. You can start living a life you love, but first, you need to find your freedom. Using financial independence and lifestyle design principles, you can create the life of your dreams now. There are many paths to freedom, and that is what this podcast is all about. My name is Becky from 20free.co, and I am the host of the Find Your Freedom podcast. Today's interview is with Whitney Hansen, a millennial financial coach, speaker, and host of the award-winning podcast, The Money Nerds. She has been featured on CNBC, ESPN, Yahoo Finance, and frequents local news channels. After paying off $30,000 in 10 months, hacking her way to a $472 MBA, and buying her first home at 19, she discovered her love for helping millennials take control of their financial life. In her free time, she travels frequently, teaches college students about personal finance as an adjunct professor, and tests side hustles for fun. In this interview, Whitney talks to me about her personal financial story, as well as how she built a six-figure money coaching business. We discuss what being a money coach is really like, how to start a coaching business, what not to do as a money coach, and how to focus on being profitable over being popular. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, Whitney.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so stoked to be here.
So happy to have you. So let's talk about your background. What personal experiences have shaped your personality and your perspectives on money and life?
Mostly childhood, honestly, like everybody, I think. So I grew up in a family that didn't really have a ton of money. We weren't poverty level for most of our life, but we weren't really super wealthy either. It was very blue collar. And I grew up in this family that was very entrepreneurial. So I'm very grateful for that aspect of it. But I didn't really have a good relationship with money all throughout my childhood. I was great at earning it and I was decent at saving it, but I wanted a lot of Barbies, if I'm being real. So I used to spend my money on just like random toys. So my journey to financial education really came from watching my mom stay in an abusive relationship for about 27 years. She was married to my dad for a really long time, and she didn't leave that relationship because of money, because she didn't have the funds to leave the situation. And I remember we moved up to Boise. It's 2 hours away. I grew up in a really small farming city. And we were sleeping on the floor of this tiny little apartment. And there's 6 kids in my family. So it's like, it was a full house, but we were so broke. And I remember thinking, like, how do we get here? What the heck happened? And part of it was my dad didn't graduate high school. He dropped out when he was a junior. My mom did graduate, but she got married when she was 17. She was a stay-at-home mom her entire life. She did not have any higher education, so she didn't really have a lot of work experience. And I remember thinking, like, this is important. This is part of what kept her in this really crappy situation. And so that's where I started to really dive down this rabbit hole of what is money and why is it important and how do you get more of it? And so that's where I started to, really dive down the personal finance rabbit hole.
Thank you for sharing your experiences with that. It seems like your experiences as a child kind of shaped what you knew that you didn't want when you were older. And so you figured out how to put yourself in a more financially secure situation. In your early financial life, which I kind of consider the time where you start to make money and you're figuring out how to spend it, were there any major mistakes that you made? Were there things that you would go back and do differently?
At that time when I was young, I had a really crazy childhood. So the earning money piece was really great for me. I don't know if I would have changed anything necessarily from the childhood, but what I would have changed is when I went off to college, I wish I wouldn't have taken out as much student debt. So that was my first aha moment of where I could have improved my life and some of the bigger mistakes that I made. I did pretty good with my finances. I really did. I went to cosmetology school. I was a nail technician all through undergrad. That's how I paid my bills. And one of the things that I realized when I graduated was I realized that debt makes decisions for you. It really impacts what jobs you apply for, if you start that business, if you chase your dreams, if you take a sabbatical, like money really is tied to that. And I started to feel that heaviness. And so that's one of the things that I wished I would not have done is just accepted money when they said, hey, here's your student loans. Do you want this amount? And yes, I do. I thought it was like free money. And so I wish I would have did that differently.
I made the same decision and feel very similarly. So, what decisions did you think that debt made for you?
Yeah, specifically the jobs. It really was down to that. So I remember I was looking at a couple different job offers and a couple different opportunities. And they both were pretty similar. One was in a company that I thought would have filled my soul, and one was one that would fill my bank. So I went for the one that was going to fill my bank account because I had this debt and I wanted to get rid of it. And I don't know if it would have transformed where I am today. I think I still would have ended up at the same place. So it's hard to say. But man, it really does. It impacts every little decision that you make. And I think more than anything, I noticed the decisions that I was making too were based off of debt. So even like saying yes to opportunities to go out with friends or birthday parties or whatever the heck it was, I had this immense guilt if I were even thinking about spending money because I had debt. And so I didn't like that mental repercussion of that either.
Yeah, it's like a monkey on your back until you get rid of it, right? So I know that you decided to get rid of your debt very quickly. What amount of debt did you start with?
I had $30,000 and it was all student debt. And so what I did was I had this fork in the road moment where I could have chose $30,000, just keep it around. Interest rates are fairly low. It's probably okay. Or I can buckle down and get rid of it as quickly as possible, kind of similar to what you were doing. And so what I decided was I was going to work as a staff accountant doing taxes and external auditing. And then nights and weekends, I was still working as a nail technician, still clipping toenails. And so I did those two different jobs and worked 80 hours a week. It was not fun. It was a ton of work, a ton of sacrifice. I sacrificed a lot of gym time. I still went to the gym, but it was tough. It was really tough. I sacrificed family time, friend time, and I would do it again in a second if I needed to because I paid it all off in 10 months. And that alleviated so much stress that I thought it was so worth it. And I was totally all in on that. So that was how I paid it off, was working two jobs and reducing my expenses.
You saying the way that getting rid of your debt made you feel brought me back to how I felt when I realized that I had finished all of my high interest debt and paid all of that off. And it also made me think that a concept that I'm starting to realize as I get older is that contrast is kind of the key to happiness. If we can't experience something bad, we don't know what something good feels like. And people who haven't had student debt actually don't know the feeling of immense relief and freedom that you get from getting rid of that monkey on your back. Not that I would wish that people who don't have debt would have some so they can realize what the freedom feels like, but I think it's a very unique feeling and it's very, very motivating. Having debt is something that I hear over and over again that makes people work harder than they've ever worked in their entire lives. And so it sounds like that did the same for you.
It did. And ironically, too, when I got rid of the debt, I almost had this moment of almost a letdown. I had worked so hard and I was in the trenches that when I finally hit that goal, it was exciting. It felt great. But what I actually learned more than anything was to love the journey. And it was making those extra payments every single month and waiting for my next paycheck to come in so I could make a big, huge extra payment. That's the stuff that I got so stinking stoked about. Like it was the best feeling in the world. And I was almost had this moment of like sadness when I paid it off because I'm like, well, now freaking what? Like, what do I do now? And it was tough, but yeah, I'd say more than anything, if you're on the debt payoff journey, you really have to learn to love the process. Otherwise, you're going to hate it the entire time. And when you get to that end goal, it feels great, but it's going to be ultimately very unfulfilling if you can't find some joy in the journey.
And I think what you just said is actually great life advice because someone like me is very type A, especially around the finances part of my life, thought for the longest time that what would make me happy was hitting my next milestone and achieving that next thing and that next thing and that next thing. And finally, I would have enough money and I could retire early. And that would be like the pinnacle of all happiness. But ultimately, if you're not enjoying your journey to financial independence, if you're not living a lifestyle that you've chosen for yourself, that you've designed intentionally, that you truly want and enjoy, it's not going to be worth it because that payoff isn't going to be as immense as you imagined that it would be.
No. I'm curious for you, how did you break through that from being like a box checker into enjoying the journey?
I still struggle with it on a daily basis, to be honest, but I think realizing that several of those really big boxes that I checked were not how I thought they were going to be. For example, I paid off that $70,000 of student loans, and that was great, but I'm very good at saying, well, that's done, on to the next one.
That's right.
And the same thing when I hit $100,000 in assets. I was like, wow, this is great. That's awesome. On to the next one. And that was fairly recent. So it's something that I still struggle with, but on a daily basis, I have to remind myself I designed my lifestyle to be what I want it to be. So I need to enjoy it. That's the whole point.
Amen. I think that's such a good point.
After you paid off your undergraduate debt, you went back to school and you got an MBA. And you got your MBA for less than $500. Can you tell me how you did that?
Yeah, I love this story because I think it's so important for people to understand that we have options when it comes to paying for school. And so at this time, was working in public accounting, knew it wasn't for me, had that sinking feeling in my stomach. Every time I went into the office, I knew this wasn't my job. And so I was like, well, what the heck is my job? What is it going to be? And I thought, I'm analytical, I'm very creative. Maybe it's corporate marketing. And so I went to the MBA program with that goal in mind, is I'm going to be a corporate marketer and climb that ladder as high as I possibly could. And one of the things that I was doing was I had paid off all the debt. So I was trying to figure out, how the heck am I going to pay for this new MBA program? And I made a list. I was like, okay, here's how you can do it. You can work for a job that does tuition reimbursement. You can join the military. You can do all of these different things. You can cash flow it and just save up money. There's scholarships. There's graduate assistantships. And so I was looking through all these different options. And when I was working at the salon, I had a client that came in and she told me, hey, I work for Boise State. And one of the things that we're doing is we're hiring somebody for grant management. If you know of anybody, let me know. And initially I'm like, grant management, that sounds a lot like accounting, not really interested, not for me, but I'll keep my eyes open. And she mentioned this thing just in passing, that one of the benefits of working for a university is that you get a discount on tuition. So you can go back to school for $5 per credit. And I was like, what? This is amazing.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, exactly. Like light bulb, fireworks, all that fun stuff. And that's when I had my moment where I'm like, whoa, did not even know this was a thing. Had no freaking clue that if you work for a university, you get a discount on tuition. And so I applied for the job. I told her I was interested, sent in my resume. I got hired on because I knew her. It's actually slightly difficult to work for a university. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. But if you know somebody, it's a lot easier to get hired on. And so that's how I was able to do it. It was a part-time MBA program, full-time work. And so I was working 40 hours a week and then going to school in the nights. And at that same time is about when I started to launch the business as well. I was helping people with finances for fun and thought, this is kind of cool. I wonder where this could lead me. And so that was kind of my journey with the MBA program.
And when you graduated, you had paid only $500 for that.
$472. Isn't that wild?
It is. And a lot of people pay as much, if not more, than their undergraduate for their master's, especially if they're going for a particular name brand type of school.
Yep, exactly. It's nuts.
What I'm hearing is you should really consider your options. And that's something a lot of us don't do when we're going into undergrad. We could consider things like scholarships and going to get an associate's degree for 2 years and get our full bachelor's degree for free after that as well, if there's a state program for it. But you can do the same for an MBA. A lot of people think you have to buy that MBA, and it doesn't have to be the case.
No, it doesn't. And I love that you're bringing this up too, because I see so many people, when you are narrow-minded enough that you don't allow yourself to see different options, in business, in finance, in life, in travel, like in every area of our life, we have options. But if you think there's only one way to do something, you can have an opportunity right in front of you and you won't even recognize it because you don't even allow yourself to believe it's an option. And so that was one of the big life lessons that I learned from that, was be open to different ways of doing things when it comes to money. And that has really served me well too.
Yeah, and it sounds like you being open to that opportunity was what made that position click in your mind, as that position could work for me, for my goals, what I'm looking for, instead of passing it along to someone else because you thought that there was no option and you had to pay for your MBA.
Mm-hmm. Exactly the case.
Love it. I want to talk about your journey to being a business owner and becoming a financial coach. So how did you get started in doing that?
Yeah, initially I got started from personal experience. So I had paid off my debt. I had friends and family that were asking me, how did you do this? I'd love to pay off my debt as well. And so I would sit down with them in Starbucks and work for free 99, like not making a single penny, and just teach them, this is how you budget. This is which debt you can tackle first. Here's some side hustles you might try. And just doing a lot of the basics. And I didn't realize that could be a business because at that time, God, this would have been like 2014-ish is when I started to really help people a little bit more. And during that time, the only way to make money in personal finance was to either be a blogger or be a CFP, a certified financial planner. And I really didn't like either one of those approaches. Like I tried the blogging stuff. I was doing that for fun. I didn't love it. I don't love writing. I really don't. I know we talked about that too. Not my thing. But I didn't want to be a financial planner either. I knew there was a lot of restrictions and requirements and a lot of things that you can and cannot say. And even down to like your logo can't have an arrow pointing up in it. And there was just so much stuff where I'm like, God, that does not sound like fun to me. That doesn't sound like really helping people. And so I kind of ignored the business side of it. I didn't realize that money coaching was a thing until I started going through my MBA program. And at that time, I stumbled across a program called Venture College, which is a Boise State program. And the whole process of Venture College is to help students launch businesses while they're still students. And so it was a play on economic development to see, can students actually make money when they're in college? We know they can, like we see incubators all across the country, but that was their hypothesis going in. And so I joined that program. I applied and got accepted into it. And I started off the business with the idea that I was going to teach workshops to high school students. So I wanted to get a little bit more preventative, get them before they make all the mistakes and help them not go $30,000 into debt. And so that was where I initially began, was trying to teach high school students about money. And it's evolved drastically since then, but that's where my business initially started, was in-person workshops for high school students.
And were you going to your MBA program full time, or were you working while you were getting your MBA?
Definitely working while getting the MBA. Yep. So it was 40 hours in my full-time job. And then it was a 3-year MBA program. So the MBA program that I was part of was 52 credits.
Okay. And then you were also working on starting this business on the side of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, about a year and a half into my program is actually when I stopped working at the salon. So I was even doing that job for quite some time because I got into the habit of just having extra money and just saving as much as I could. And I really loved that. But it got kind of heavy. And so I could start to feel myself like, oh, this sucks. I'm kind of getting a little burned out. And so I quit the salon job and was living just off my full-time job, which was more than enough. And at that time too, it was like, yeah, growing the business on the side, but it didn't feel like work. It really didn't, because it was so enjoyable. And I was constantly learning new things and learning about digital marketing and what the heck is a webinar. Like I was doing all of these really interesting things that it didn't feel like work at all. It actually felt like I was just doing little lifestyle experiments. I loved it.
That's a great thing about starting your own business around something that feels like a hobby or it feels like fun, because you're not being drained outside of work. I found when I was working on the side, I was side hustling in my business before I left my full-time job. I felt that I was giving my best hours to my employer and I couldn't give it to my baby, which was, my blog and turned into this podcast, and I really wanted to be able to work in the morning when I'm awake and I'm really active and really creative on the things that I cared about, not necessarily the things that my boss cared about. I wanted to ask you about that transition, if you were feeling similarly, and how you made that decision to move away from your full-time job and go into entrepreneurship full-time.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty blessed because the job that I was working, I've since learned that government jobs in higher education, it moves at a very different pace than startups. And so you're almost incentivized to not finish your projects early. It's totally twisted. And I always feel bad saying this, but it is kind of true. And so you're forced to just like pace yourself so that you're not sitting around with no work to do. And so I did have some free time. And during that free time, I was able to go on walks and I was able to listen to audiobooks and podcasts. A lot of it was kind of mindless work. Parts of it was just like data analysis and that kind of stuff, which I didn't need to be super in tune with. It was just plugging in numbers, really. And so it was okay for me. So it wasn't a very draining career. I think if it were, it might be a little bit different. but it was a very chill job. And therefore, I still had a lot of energy to work on my own business stuff. And I did experience that too. I'm much better and I'm much more productive in the mornings. And no, all my good hours were going to my employer. And it did suck. So that's just like part of like growing pains of business, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the type of job you have for sure, on how energy sucking it is.
How did you financially prepare to take the leap into entrepreneurship? Did you want to be able to replace your full-time income before you left to go full-time? Did you have a emergency fund amount that you wanted to save? What did that look like for you to feel comfortable to take that next step?
So I'm an over preparer with my family life growing up. Financial insecurity was something that I saw a lot of. So financial security for myself is the utmost important thing. I'm fiercely independent. I have to know that I can take care of myself. And so one of the ways that I did this was I didn't jump ship immediately. I've been in business now for officially 4 to 5 years. Before that, I actually consider myself in business truly for about 3 years. Before that, it was more of a hobby, honestly. And so once I started to really dig into my financials for my business, I started to see I needed some money, a cash reserve, for me to feel okay with this decision. I needed some money sitting aside in a savings account for a business emergency fund. So if something happened, I have money that I can lean on to pay for my business expenses. Now it's an online one, so there's really not much, but I still needed to see some money sitting there. And it took me 2 years before I was officially comfortable with jumping ship. The first year my business income was about the same as my full-time job. So it was like making about 37 to 40,000, I think is about where I was in my business. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty much there. Like I can see that there's potential. But in the back of my head, I said, but what if this goes away? But what if this is a fluke? What if tomorrow my business totally goes downhill and I have no money? And so I continued working my full-time job and running my business for another year. And once my revenue completely surpassed my full-time job income by quite a bit, that's when I knew this is a safe decision. You're not going to hurt yourself. Your business income isn't going to go away. You're going to be just fine. It's an appropriate time to jump ship. So for me, that's what I personally had to do, was get that business emergency fund and prove that my business can make me money. So that's what I did.
In a sustainable manner as well, not just, oh, this might be a fluke, a one-time thing. Yeah, and I'm actually hearing that maybe some of that financial insecurity as a child made you need, like you said, to be an over preparer, but also to have a bit of a scarcity mindset where you were worried that the money would not come back, that there was a limited supply and you might not be able to get it again.
That is 100% true.
Did you find that you've been able to get out of that scarcity mindset?
I would say for the most part, yes. My natural tendency is always to revert back to that. It's very ingrained, and man, those roots run deep. So I try really hard to be aware of it. But I've done a ton of mindset work around thought work specifically. So I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, but thought work is all about monitoring what are you telling yourself day to day. So your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions lead to your results. So if you don't have the result that you want, what are the thoughts that support that result? And so I started to really dig into that. And what I learned is that most of my thoughts were supporting a very mediocre career. It was, making middle, I don't know, maybe 50 grand, which I think is incredible. If that's where people are at, that's awesome. That's not what I wanted for my own life. I knew I wanted to make a lot more money, but my thoughts were stuck around that because that's all I had seen. And so anytime I get back to that thought of like, oh, going back to scarcity again, I've learned to name that negativity. I name her Agatha. This is so weird. I do. I named my negativity Agatha. And whenever she creeps in, I tell her, Agatha, shut up. Like, you are not making decisions for my life. You can be in the car with me, but you're not going to tell me where to turn. And that has helped. It sounds so cheesy, but I'm all about those little cheesy things that work. And so for me, that really did help break through that scarcity mindset to one of abundance and one of rationalizing what's possible and what's not, is just like really monitoring your thoughts.
Yeah, and making sure that you can separate what you want and what you believe from that internal chatterbox that's having all of those negative things that they say about you or about your choices, or you have to worry about this for this reason, or you shouldn't make that choice because it's risky or dangerous. Sometimes I feel like it's like a helicopter parent voice in my head that's like, you shouldn't make that choice, it could be dangerous. And I am very comfortable now taking calculated risks. I don't take these like wild, insane, risks that I didn't think out before, but I make a lot of choices that I think if I ran them by, for example, my actual parents, who aren't helicopter parents, first they would say, no, absolutely not. You shouldn't do that. If you want our advice, make sure that you stay safe and that you're in a very stable, secure position and you don't take any risks ever. But ultimately, that's like your survival instinct speaking, saying, I want you to be safe. I want you to be financially secure. And growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone. So you have to get a little bit uncomfortable.
You do. I love that you mentioned that too. And I think one of the things that always bothered me about the message around entrepreneurship is there's always that quote of entrepreneurs are the ones that will jump out of the plane and build the parachute on the way down. And that never resonated with me because I care a lot about my money. I work very, very hard for it. And I know what it's like to sleep on the floor of an apartment. I don't want to go back there. And so I think once you get a standard in life, it's hard to imagine what your life could be going back to that negative scenario. But it never resonated with me. I hated that message. And what I've since learned after talking with literally hundreds of entrepreneurs is most entrepreneurs are very risk averse. But like you said, they take calculated risks. They're not burning the bridge and going all in on one idea. It happens occasionally, but usually people have a lot on the line and it's very calculated, slow growth. And I think that message resonates a lot more with me.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think risk management is a really important kind of foundational concept in entrepreneurship. And you kind of embody that with having a really solid financial plan before you took the leap. Do you feel like you took the leap at the right time, or you probably could have, in hindsight, left a little bit earlier?
I got that question just recently. I was speaking at an event about entrepreneurship, and that was the exact question. And it kind of made me pause and really question, would I have jumped ship earlier? And honestly, I think what happened for me happened at the perfect time. I think if I would have jumped ship earlier, what I would have done is I would have failed sooner because all of that pressure of just making my business perform at a certain revenue amount would have been placed on to my coaching clients. It would have been reflective in my marketing. It would have been very much ingrained in everything I do. And I didn't like that. The other thing too about keeping a job for a little bit longer than you think is necessary is it gives you a lot of money to just play with in your business. You can run these really crazy experiments. You can run Facebook ads or Instagram ads. You can do all kinds of things. You can invest in programs or conferences if you have that cash flow. But if you're relying on your business and that's the sole form of income and you don't have any play money, I find that can actually hurt your business. And so I don't think I would have jumped ship any sooner. I think it actually worked out at a perfect time for me.
That's really great to hear. And you just went forward instead of feeling like you had to have desperation in your marketing and I need money and I might fail. That fear of failure was kind of quelled by proving to yourself that this was a sustainable thing. That's great to hear. What did you think that financial coaching would be like, and what did it actually end up being like? Were those two things different?
Hugely different. So what I thought coaching would be is what everybody thinks coaching will be. You work with clients, you're sitting down, you're helping them create a budget, you're helping them pay off debt, build up a savings plan, maybe side hustle. So it's all that really fun stuff that you go into business for. That is actually not what running a coaching business is about. It's more about marketing. Because what I find is there's some incredibly qualified people that really know their stuff, but they can't get clients because they do not know how to position themselves in the marketplace. And so once I started to learn that I'm actually more in a marketing business than I am in a coaching business, that shifted for me because what I realized is I need an influx of coaching clients. I need to have consistent applications if I want to survive. And most coaches do not do that. They don't make money because they focus so much on how to coach instead of how do I market myself as a coach? How do people learn about me and my services? I think it's almost flipped. And I wish more people would dive into the learn by doing than the learn everything and then see what you can do. I think I see a lot of people spend a ton of money on just trying to learn about coaching when realistically spend that money on learning how do you market yourself, because there's a ton of coaches out there that are all very qualified. The only difference is if you stand out from everybody else. And that 100% comes down to digital marketing.
Absolutely. So, a big portion of the time that you were spending, you found was actually on getting the word out and not on spending that time with those clients. Because if nobody knows you exist, nobody's going to pay you for your services, right?
Exactly. And it's almost a letdown because you go into coaching thinking you're going to help all the people, and you do, you really do. But again, it's if you don't have that influx of applications, you're not helping very many people at all. So you can spend all of your time with one client, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have enough money and you're going to need to go back to your day job. And so that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of coaches make.
You do the coaching part. Do you also manage that content creation and the sales funnel and everything, or do you have a team that you work with now?
So now as my business has grown, I have more of a team. So I have a person that is my podcast editor. Shout out to Oliver. He's the best. He literally is the best. And I discovered him through Boise State. He's a music composer at Boise State. So he really understands the ins and outs of that stuff. And so I was leveraging different resources to figure out how do I affordably hire somebody that's qualified, can do the job, and fits my budget. So that's my podcast editor. And then I also have a virtual assistant. And so they do just project-based work. When I feel like I need some extra help, they step into the ring for me. And then in addition to that, I have somebody that manages my Pinterest. So those are the 3 employees that I have that are contractors.
I 100% have to like put it out there. If you don't have someone managing your Pinterest, hire someone to manage your Pinterest.
For real.
That was the first hire that I made, and it has made all the difference because Pinterest takes a ton of time and it has a great return on investment of time, but nobody has time to run a business and do Pinterest at the same time.
It's a pain in the butt. No, it is a pain. I did it for a little bit, and finally I was like, no, this is not worth my time. I was using Tailwind Tribes, and so just like filling up your queue, oh man, not so fun.
Yes, I totally agree. That was my experience with it as well. So, what exactly does a financial coach do? Can you walk me through maybe your day to day, but what are the main responsibilities in your job? What do you spend your time on, and how does that make you money?
Yeah. So what a financial coach is somebody that's helping people with the day-to-day of their financial life. This is the budgeting, the debt, and the savings. It's usually those 3 core topics. It's not digging into financial investing. So you're not giving investing advice. You're not giving tax advice. In fact, legally, you cannot do that. So that's a very fine line that I caution a lot of coaches to not tread over. And so that's what you're doing. A money coach is just somebody that's helping with the habit change. And then in addition to that, what a day in the life looks like, I always hate this, but it's true. Every day is a little bit different. So for me, I do all of my coaching clients Monday through Wednesday. That's when I have all of my coaching calls. And then Thursdays is my content creation day. And Fridays are my CEO days. That's when I dive into my business. I look at my metrics, my analytics, my revenue numbers. I update all of my financials. And I'm really looking through what's the strategy that I want to start implementing. I'm reviewing and visualizing where my business is going. So that's all of my Friday stuff. But yeah, all of my coaching calls are Monday through Wednesday typically. And then podcasts I usually only do on Wednesdays.
So it sounds like you have theme days where you're time blocking and you're staying on the same topic for the entire day or maybe even more than one day, but they're grouped together to keep that like task switching from becoming a distraction and a productivity, sucker.
As much as I can. I've experienced different perspectives of that, and I've tried it in my business. And for now, this is working really good. What I used to do when I was a very early money coach, I would have calls literally 7 days a week, and I would take calls 7 days a week. And it got to the point where I love hiking and being outdoors and just going on adventures. And I couldn't do that. I remember one day my mom and I were in Oregon. So we went on a little trip to the beach. And I literally told my mom, hey, can you pull over? I have to take a coaching call. And that's when I was like, this is ridiculous, Whitney. Like, this is ridiculous. It does not need to be this way. And so then I started to time batch a little bit more with my coaching calls, and it hasn't affected my business at all. It was more of a mental barrier I had to break through.
And now, do you take any calls like outside of normal work hours? Do you take some calls at night because people who might be calling you for help are working during the day?
I do. So I'm in Mountain Time, but I will usually work until about 9 p.m. Mountain Time, Monday through Wednesday for sure, for coaching clients. Yeah.
And do you extend your day, or do you take some time off in the morning or throughout the day so you're not working a 12-hour
Yeah,
day?
no, typically, I mean, I do a pretty good job at giving myself like a lunch break and breaks in between different tasks, but I'm usually working pretty consistently those days.
That's good for, financial coaches or people interested in becoming financial coaches to know, because I think some people think, oh, well, I can make my own schedule now, no problem. I can, work these hours. I'm most productive in the morning. I want to work in the morning. But if you have clients that you have to work with, you have to work with their schedules.
That's exactly the case. And I think for a lot of coaches or coaching clients, you're going to be working with people in traditional 9 to 5 jobs. And most of the time, it's early in the morning, it's during their lunch break, or it's in the evenings. And so you do have to cater to their schedules a little bit because, yes, you are in business for yourself, but you still have another boss. Your boss is the people paying your bill. So you still have to cater to their schedules.
Yeah, I think that's another misconception about entrepreneurship in general, is that all of a sudden I am my own boss. I don't have a boss anymore. Nobody controls me. But if you want to pay the bills, your clients become your boss, and you can actually end up having multiple bosses,
They
right?
do. They really do. I think that is a giant misconception. We all have bosses, and for some reason, we think we don't want a boss, but I actually find it makes me perform better when I know I have people that I have to show up for and I have to chat with. And you just, I don't know. I think the idea of like lifestyle freedom is almost a misconception when you run your business. Yes, you have flexibility. You can block off your time, but you still have to perform. You still have to work. You still have to do the reps. You can't just go sit on the beach all day and make money. Like that is not entrepreneurship, at least not the version I have. And so if anybody knows a different way of doing it, let me know. But from what I've seen is you really do have to put in the time and energy.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think we idealize entrepreneurship in our culture and in our society, but in the common sense of it, you have to do the work if you want to make the money. So I wanted to ask, is this is kind of like a high turnover client job, right? Where you might coach a client for a couple of months or maybe even a year. But how long is your average client working with you before they kind of either advance so that they can manage their own, or they might need to move on to a different level with someone who's certified?
Exactly the case. So, what I do is my coaching program, just to give everybody context, is 3 months at a time. And over those 3 months, we're meeting every single week in some capacity. So, I personally I work with 30 people max per month. That's all I can initially handle. And so, you're exactly right. You have a problem, right? You have a funnel problem. People go out the door, and then what? And so, that was something for a long time that I didn't even worry about because, frankly, I was like, you know what? If I just get enough clients in the door, I'm going to be okay if I can pay the bills. So now my coaching business is starting to evolve, and the next phase is going to encapsulate more of that. So what that's going to look like for my coaching business in the future is more group coaching programs. And so those are going to be almost like a monthly gym membership where you pay a set fee, you get workshops, you get trainings, you get coaching, and that is more of that stickiness. So it's not 3 months and you're out. It's a little bit more consistent. And so currently the average client stays on for about 6 months. And then after that, they are feeling comfortable and confident, which is exactly what I want them to do. And they're off into their own place. But the group coaching model, I think, will help with that. And then in addition to that, I envision retreats and workshops and live events that could be tacked onto that too.
Yeah, and it sounds like even with the group coaching, you're working towards a little bit more of a passive income model where you're not always going to be a service-based business where you're one-on-one, face-to-face, or on the phone with a client. You can do some work ahead of time, and that could then be, sent to the people through a workshop. You're also doing one-to-many, which is a little bit more of leveraged use of your time.
Exactly the case. One of the things too, just to give everybody context, when I first started the business, I was only focusing on courses and how many courses can I sell? And I was actually shying away from one-on-one coaching because it didn't scale. I was telling myself, there's no way to scale this. I'm not going to put my time and energy into that. But what I found is by doing what was unscalable in the beginning, that's where you start to make some good money. And then once you get to that point, the next level up is okay, now how do I scale my time further? And I think that's where group coaching comes into play. But the experience you gain from that one-on-one coaching is everything. I think if I would have jumped in initially trying to do group coaching, I would have failed miserably. I think it would have been a total cluster. I really think it would have been. So it's really important that you get that experience from the one-on-one coaching and doing what's unscalable in the very, very beginning of your business.
That'll also get you things like testimonials, right? And you have proven that you can provide what you're offering. I think some people want to jump into it and they want to scale really quickly, but if they don't have the experience of talking to a group, either people will say, well, I don't know if you have the skills that I'm looking for because no one's written about that before, and saying, yes, Whitney helped me pay off all my debt and get a higher paying job and all of these things. So you're getting that social proof, but also you don't really want to test things out in front of a group if you're not sure what your content is going to be or how you're going to deliver it.
Yeah, agreed. I think that there's a lot of power in learning from experience with the one-on-one model. And as you mentioned, the testimonials, that's everything. And what I learned too is when you're coaching, you're constantly going to be learning new problems. I still to this day have clients that ask a question. I'm like, don't know. Let me go find out. And it's very, very normal. So you're never going to have all the answers. And I think that's another misconception about coaching is people think they have to know every little thing. And you don't. You can be honest about it.
Such great advice. Well, and it's also better to be honest about it than to say something that you think might be right, or, saying, let me get back to you on that is probably going to keep your credibility more intact than giving out some advice so that you can seem more knowledgeable. Ultimately, I think your reputation will benefit from the honesty.
Agreed.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what those rules are around what you can and can't say with investing advice specifically?
Yep. So if you're a coach and you're looking at somebody's asset allocation, just the different ways their money is being invested, if you're looking at that, you cannot legally recommend maybe you should move all your money to this index fund, or maybe you should move your money to this bond. You can't legally do that because you're not certified in that area. So you can't do that at all. And one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of is a lot of coaches do tread that line. And it's a dangerous line to tread because what I'm finding is as money coaching is becoming a lot more popular, the regulation hasn't caught up to it, but it will at some point. And I think there's going to be some very severe hand slaps that are going to be very costly. So it's just better to get ahead of that beforehand. And in your coaching calls, when you do your discovery calls, be very upfront. Hey, if you're looking for somebody to tell you how to invest your money, I'm not your person. I'm not a CFP. I don't do that. If you need specific tax advice, I'm not a CPA. I don't do that. What I do help you with is XYZ. And so I think it's knowing where you can and cannot give advice on. And the other piece is insurance. That's kind of another one you have to be careful with too. You can't really tell people go buy this term life insurance. You can suggest things and you can educate them on what this stuff means in theory, but be really careful about giving specific plans on that stuff. That's just a really dangerous way to go.
So if I was your client and I said, hey, Whitney, I want to figure out what I do with my investments. Now that I have money to invest, what would you recommend? What is your typical response to something like that?
Yeah, usually I'll look at the numbers with them to teach them, here's where your expense ratios are. This is what your load fees are. This is the sales charges. This is what that means for you. Here's what an index fund is. Here's what a bond is. So I'll educate on what that stuff means from a terminology level and what it means for their financial life. And then from there, I tell them, hey, I'm not qualified to give you this advice. So definitely consult with a CFP if you want to reallocate this stuff. I just want to teach you, here's what this stuff means so that you can comprehend and get a basic level of education. So that's how I personally approach it. If I ever have somebody that's in a similar situation to me, what I will do is I will tell them, here's what I'm personally doing in my own life. This is how my money is invested. And this is why I chose it to be invested this way. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm just teaching you, this is what I do. And so that I find helps a lot of people too, so they can understand the thought process behind why you would choose certain investments. And then again, it's on them to get that professional help. But I almost always point them to Vanguard for anything retirement related.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question is I see a lot of people who either are starting to coach, kind of on an informal basis and things like that. We like to talk about the things that we like. If I'm a big fan of Vanguard, I want to tell people about it. And if I think that index funds are the way to go rather than actively managed mutual funds, I would feel more inclined to say something like that to my clients. But speaking from personal experience and saying this is what I prefer, however, you have an individual situation, and if you want specific stock advice, you should talk to a certified financial planner. That is going to cover you better than if you were to say, I recommend to everyone that they sign up for Vanguard and they get VTSAX, and putting yourself in a situation where you could be getting a slap on the wrist later.
Yeah, exactly the case. I think you have to cover your butt. And I think your disclaimers are really helpful in that way. But more than anything, it's just having that clear boundary of who are you? What do you do? What does a money coach do? And what does a money coach not do? And I think as long as you stay in that lane, you're gonna be okay.
That's good to know. Do you have to be someone who has a financial background education wise? I know you have an accounting background and you have a career background in accounting, but do you have to have that kind of background to be a money coach?
I don't think so. I really don't. I see some great money coaches that come from all walks of life. And I see some that have a financial background and probably shouldn't be financial coaches. Maybe they don't. I notice it seems like sometimes a lot of the more education you have, the more you can't simplify the terminology for people.
The less relatable you become.
Yeah, right. You're like,
yeah.
just do this, and yeah, like they're like doing all these sophisticated calculations,
jargon, and
nobody has time for that.
Formulas.
Exactly. So I don't think it really has anything to do with your background. I think it comes down to your experience and your passion, and more importantly, how you market yourself. So what I personally do is I market myself as more of an accountability coach. And so that's why people hire me, is more for accountability. Now there's other coaches that do things totally different and they market themselves very differently. But I think that's how you can differentiate yourself. If you don't have a financial background, don't try to play into I'm so sophisticated and I know all of the terminology and I've got everything down pat. That's not who you are, and it's going to be really hard for people to believe in the beginning. But accountability and goals and budgeting, you don't have to be a financial genius for that kind of stuff. You just have to have a little bit of passion. So I think anybody can become a financial coach if you have the right heart for it and you're willing to learn the marketing.
And it sounds like authenticity is going to be really important to your brand, right? If you're trying to come from a place that is not representative of your journey, it's not going to be as relatable. But a lot of people who might not have a financial background, like myself, for example, have a personal finance education from their life experience of paying off student loan debt or starting to invest or negotiating a higher salary in their career, right? That they can lean back on that personal experience.
I think in the beginning too, that personal experience is everything. And so I think that's why a lot of money coaches find some success in the beginning, is because they have a story that's relatable and impressive. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like you don't have to be a financial coach that paid off $70,000. Like you don't have to be that kind of person, but it's helpful because that's a form of a testimonial, at least in the beginning. So I would encourage any new coaches to look through their financial life and find some element of a testimonial in there. And if you don't have one, then go work with somebody for free to try to get a testimonial so that people have some credibility with you. You're a little bit more trustworthy. You've got some experience. I think that's a really great way to go.
How does your podcast fit into your money coaching business? You're the host of the Money Nerds podcast. Is that a intro to people to the services that you provide, or is it something that you do for general financial education and fun?
It started off more for general financial education and fun, and it has now turned into a huge marketing channel for my coaching services. So what I find is the two fastest ways for people to build trust with you and to start to trust you more is video and audio. Fastest ways. And so if you're doing a combination of those things, you're going to win because people feel like they know you. You've probably had that same experience where it's like you meet somebody that you've watched their YouTube videos for years and you're like, oh my God, I feel like I know you. It's so weird. And you've never met a day in your life. That's the whole point of the marketing channels with with video and audio, is it gets people to trust you so much faster than even an email list. And you should definitely have an email list. It's very, very important. But those channels will get you to that trust building phase so much faster. So I love audio and video for that reason.
You're kind of speaking back to the core marketing concept of know, like, and trust, where first, if people want to work with you, they'd have to know about you. They obviously would want to like you to be able to work with you. And then trust, and trust comes very easily through formats like audio and video, because you feel like you've been chatting with a friend on the phone, when you're listening to them talk on a podcast in the car, or you're watching their YouTube videos, you feel like you're sitting in their living room or their bedroom with them, hanging out, and they're just giving you some casual advice.
Exactly the case. Yep.
So you've been full-time in your business for 2 years now. What have you learned? What have been some like big lessons learned as an entrepreneur, as someone who is now working from home and working for yourself?
One of the biggest life lessons that I've learned since working from home is how important your routine is. It is everything. And when I first started working from home, I was like, this is great. I can sleep in. I can start my day whenever the heck I want. If I want to watch Netflix in the middle of the day, no problem. Like, I have this lifestyle freedom. And what I learned is that's not the way to approach a business. It's still a job, even though you don't want to think of it as a job, it still is. And so I clock in, I clock out, and I am done with work. One of the hardest pieces was getting a grasp on my schedule and getting a grasp on productivity. So, what I found when I was first starting working from home is I was working on a lot, but I was getting very little done. I was working on all the wrong things. I wasn't looking at the things that were truly moving the needle and growing my business. And so I was working on the kind of the dumb tasks that really don't help, like social media and blog posts and all of this stuff that for my business, it wasn't generating revenue. And so I had to have a real come to Jesus moment where I said, Whitney, is this really what you want? Like, you can spend your entire day working on absolutely nothing, or you can get clear on what's actually moving the needle from a revenue standpoint and double down on that. And so that's what I had to do. And that took maybe 6 months of trial and error to finally figure out what's my work strategy, how do I work best, and how do I actually get stuff done when I'm working? How do you be productive?
Yeah, and I'll bet that that strategy or CEO day that you have at the end of your week, where you're able to step out of the implementation mode and go into the high level 10,000-foot view CEO mode, is very helpful in getting out of worker bee mentality and into what should we press the gas pedal harder on and what should we take a break on.
Yep, exactly the case. I think the CEO day is literally everything. And it's amazing how, even for quite some time, I wasn't even updating my own business financials, which is such a, like, as a financial coach, you're like, what? But I wasn't. I was getting kind of lazy with that. I was so used to doing it for my personal life, but for my business life, I always told myself, I just need to keep creating. I need to keep doing this stuff. And I would justify it by being busy. But when you dive into your numbers and your metrics, that's when you see what you need to be working on. And so I find that to be so beneficial during that day. It's my favorite.
And what you just said made me think of the difference between entrepreneurship and working in a corporate job, for example, is a lot of corporate jobs expect you to look or be busy. But being busy or looking busy in your own business does not matter if you're not making money.
No, exactly the case. I think a lot of times it's easy in the online businesses to focus on the vanity metrics. How many podcast downloads do I have? How many Instagram followers do I have? What's my Facebook group? What's my YouTube channel? How many email subscribers? That stuff really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. What matters is, are you converting that into dollars? Is it paying your bills? And I've learned that it's so much better to focus on being profitable over popular. And when I think you truly embrace that, man, your business can really grow. It really can.
So now that we're talking about that, do you mind sharing how your business has grown since the revenue that you were making that you felt comfortable leaving your full-time job to now?
Yeah. So now my business is over 6 figures. And it has been amazing because, as you know, in an online business, your overhead is so tiny. You don't have a ton of expense. Well, you shouldn't have a ton of expenses usually. So it's been really, really good. It's been game changing for my life and for my business. And now I think once you get past that mark, I used to be focused so much on how do I pay the bills? How do I get more clients? How do I just earn more money? And now I think once you hit that 6 figure mark, it starts to shift more to how do I be more of service and how do I make a bigger impact? And so it's really fun to see the business change into how do I reach more people versus more of a self-centered, egotistical point of view of like, how do I just pay my bills? And I think everybody goes through that process, but that's one of the biggest shifts that I've seen as the business revenue has grown.
And you can be more creative and you can try things that you aren't sure are going to work instead of having to go back to the tried and true because you know it's going to make you money, right?
Yep, exactly the case. You get to be a lot more creative in a lot of ways.
Do you have any advice that you would give to someone who is looking to become an entrepreneur or specifically a money coach?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice is do not invest in any programs, not yet. I want you to go out there and work with somebody for free to see if you even like the idea of coaching. You might think it sounds like fun, but when you actually coach somebody, you might hate it. And it's a really good way to go to kind of test the waters and do those lifestyle experiments to see if it's for you. And then in addition to that, one of the things that you can do is if most people have sick days and vacation days that go unused, it's ridiculous. And so take those days and work on your business. Block off a couple hours, a couple days, and see, how does it feel for me to work from home? Do I enjoy it? Or is it terrible for me? So I'd say those are like the two pieces that I would recommend, is really get in the trenches and practice a day in the life before you officially make that leap to see if you even like it.
That is such great advice. I think a lot of people also jump into doing things like creating courses before they've proven if people want to buy the course. And you can spend a lot of time and even a lot of money making something that no one is ever going to buy. So testing your concept and sending out a minimum viable product can be a really helpful step forward instead of kind of jumping to the end point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think once you dive into it and you're like, yeah, coaching is for me, I kind of like this. This is for me. Then the next phase would be to analyze, what are you good at? Is it podcast? Is it video? Are you a rock star in video? Is it none of that and you're actually a better blogger? Is it speaking? Like, what is your gift? And if you can actually lean into that, you're going to get a lot more coaching clients that way. What I see a lot of people try to do is they try to just emulate, what did so and so do? What did Becky do? What did Whitney do? And they just go down this path that isn't for them. And so I think it's really important for you to express some self-awareness and say, what are the mediums that are going to generate revenue for me? And what are those areas that I really shine in? And so I think that's a next level thing, is to get some self-awareness around that and then start dabbling in that area. If you're great on video, start a YouTube channel, start Instagram TV, do Facebook Lives, do whatever you have to do to start getting comfortable with that video process and putting yourself out there. And then that's how you can start to generate clients, is you're going to get better at your messaging. And that's what people are going to resonate with.
And you also don't want to be everything to everyone. If you try to attract every single client and every single person in every age range and every demographic, you're not going to appeal to anyone because you're so general and no one can specifically resonate with your story or with your offerings. So I think being clear about who your ideal client is very helpful to attracting customers that are A, good for you to work with because you can get them results, but B, align with your ideal client as well. Have you had any experience with attracting the wrong clients and then realizing that you kind of have an ideal client that you want and figuring out how that works?
All the time. Yes. And I will say, you're going to attract the wrong clients and you're probably going to work with them in the beginning because you need to pay the bills. And I respect that. I totally get that. And so I'd say, as you work with people more, you're going to find your niche. You're going to find what really speaks to your soul and which clients are fun for you. I've gotten really good at it now, where I can hop on a discovery call and I can immediately tell if it's going to be a fit or not. I'm like, oh no, this is going to be a pain in the butt, like not a good fit. I can already feel it out. But in the beginning, I couldn't. So I would just work with basically anybody that came my way. And so I would say through experience is where you're going to find your niche. And I would caution people. I see a lot of people try to niche down too soon. They try to say immediately, this is who my client is. But you don't know that yet. You don't know who you enjoy working with until you work with the different variety of people. And so that's one thing that I would say, is just work with a diverse group and then niche down based off of your experience of what do you personally enjoy the most.
And you've had hundreds of clients to help you inform and kind of dial in what works well for you. So that's great advice coming from someone with a lot of experience.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say too that a lot of times the clients you're going to attract in the beginning are very similar to you. They're similar walks of life. They're similar personality types. They resonate with you already. So that's probably who your niche might be. But again, be open-minded because you don't know where it's going to lead you. It might actually be people that are not similar to you, because maybe similar people to you are frugal and aren't willing to invest in coaching. And so maybe it's high income earners. But be careful about niching down to people that are just like you, because sometimes the people that are just like you aren't going to give you the money so that you can grow your business. And that was one of the mistakes I made early on too, was trying to target people that were frugal and financially savvy. And what I learned is they don't need a coach if they're frugal and financially savvy. They probably have it figured out. And so that wasn't going to pay my bills. So I had to move on to a different market segment.
That's great advice. And I think a lot of us end up finding that our ideal client somewhat overlaps with who we were in the past and a stage that we were previously in before we knew about money and before we had fixed the mistakes that we made, maybe when we were still in our mistake making phase. So that's great advice, to look for people who might be similar to you, but not get stuck with only those people.
Yeah, I see this a lot with financial independence coaches. I have a few friends that tried that, and they were targeting people that wanted to be financially independent. But as you and I know, those people are very resourceful. They are super, super resourceful. They're kind of nerdy already. They're already running the numbers. They generally aren't interested in investing in a coach because they're pinching pennies so they can hit their FI goal faster. And so that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of financial independence coaches try to do, when in reality, I'm like, yo, you're leaving money on the table. There's people over here that are trying to pay off debt that would happily pay for your help and accountability, but you're trying to chase this market because you have a lot of passion around this market. And it's just not always the best way to go. It can sometimes work, but typically it's not necessarily the best way to go.
That makes sense. How has working for yourself changed your lifestyle and maybe helped you live a more ideal lifestyle?
So before, I used to feel guilty if I would take vacation. I really did. I'd feel
When you were working for yourself or when you were working for someone else?
full time. Yeah. And for working for somebody else, I used to feel really guilty. And so now what I have done is I have incorporated travel into my normal life. And so what that looks like is if I see a great deal on a flight, I immediately book that flight and I go on a vacation. Sometimes that's 2 weeks notice, sometimes it's 6 months. But that has been one of the biggest shifts for me, is just being able to give myself permission to pursue both passions and not feel guilty about it. It has been so much fun. The only crappy thing about that is everyone around me has normal 9 to 5 jobs. So usually it's like solo travel, which is not always the most fun. But man, I think that's one of the biggest pieces of freedom. Or if you're working on a project, you're like, you know what, I'm done. I just want to go to the gym. You can just leave and go to the gym and not have to answer to anybody. So I love the lifestyle flexibility from that perspective.
It sounds like you've found a lot of freedom by working for yourself. And you also have been able to cut yourself some slack, because there are other types of entrepreneurs that don't sleep and they don't eat and they don't take vacation. They're actually even harder on themselves than their boss was when they were working in a full-time position. And I don't think that that's really the idea that a lot of us have when we're planning to go into entrepreneurship. I think a lot of people go into entrepreneurship with the idea that they're going to start living their ideal lifestyle. And it might take you a little while to find that balance. You know, I'm pretty new into my entrepreneurship journey where I'm working full-time for myself, and balance is challenging. You don't have as much external accountability as you do when you're working for a boss. And for some people that might mean you're working too much because no one's telling you to stop and go home. And for some people that might mean that you're not working enough, for you're sleeping in, or you might be binging on Netflix instead of talking to clients and things like that. So there's an adjustment period that comes with it, but it's important to keep in mind why you're taking the leap into entrepreneurship and what outcome you're looking for lifestyle wise.
I agree. I think a lot of times too, as you get into entrepreneurship, what you start to learn is that money comes from value, not working more hours. And so if you are producing a high amount of volume and value, you're going to be fine. You're going to be okay. But working a ton of hours in the wrong direction doesn't matter. Like if you're not working on the right tasks, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're never going to move the needle. And that's why it's so critical that you start to identify, what do I need to do to get me to the next level? How do I get to $10,000? Okay, now how do I get to 50? Okay, now how do I get to 100? What do I do after that? So you start to scale up and you start to work on just the tasks that are important for that specific revenue marker. And I think that will keep you in line enough where you're working on the right stuff and you're not just burning yourself out trying to work 15-hour days when you don't really need to do that. You just need to work on the right tasks.
That is a knowledge bomb right there. That is such good advice, I think, for every entrepreneur to hear. Do you work while you're traveling? Are you a little bit location independent with this job, or do you like to take time off where you're not taking calls and you're not checking your email and things like that when you're traveling?
I usually am doing some form of work even when I travel. And I could structure it differently. Most of it's because I'm a very spontaneous person, so I don't block off my calendar with enough time where it doesn't get booked up. So I do find that most of the time when I travel, I do have to do some type of coaching calls or a podcast or something of that sort. And I'm okay with it. I think if I were to have kids in my future, I don't want my kids to see that. I want them to see that I can truly unplug and be okay with that. But for now, I'm okay with it.
That's great. And it sounds like you're working within your lifestyle right now and you're flexible for that to change in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of the great freedoms that's afforded by working for yourself, right?
It's pretty great. There's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons, but in general, I think it's very rewarding to be able to work from anywhere and to be the person that decides what do I do to move the business forward. I think that's a really empowering feeling, and it comes with a lot of freaking pressure about where's my money coming from. And if you have a lot of, so I mentioned like financial security is my number one. Learning to deal with the ups and downs of income was so freaking hard. Oh my gosh. It's still sometimes I'll check my accounts and I'm like, where's my money? Like, what's going on now? And like, when's it coming in? And then 3 days later you get checks for like $2,000. But it's like it takes so much time to get used to that variability in income. And I know everybody hears that, but until you experience it, man, it's next level. It is really tough, especially if you prioritize financial security. So you just have to learn to trust yourself and the business and the process, and that the money will come in. It will flow to you if you're doing the right steps and you're working on the right tasks. It'll come in, but you have to really trust the process.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about leaving their job to work for themselves? They know they're in a financial situation where they could do it, but they're still a little scared.
I would say, why are you scared? So I would dig into what's the reason behind that. Are you scared because it's irrational, or are you scared for very rational things? If you're the breadwinner in your family and you're scared to lose that income stream, that's a very legitimate thing. That makes perfect sense. If you're scared because you feel like it might fail and you might look like an idiot in front of your family and friends, that's an irrational fear. Your family and friends don't really care. They're not really paying that close of attention. But I would say dig into that fear behind what's stopping you, what's really holding you back, and lean into that. And then in addition to that, prepare. Like really get your business finances in order. Make sure your personal life is set. You've got your personal emergency fund in place. Ideally, you're out of debt. If it's a long process, maybe that's not the case, but ideally you'd be debt free and with a pretty decent emergency fund. And then have that business emergency fund as well, because that's going to give you a lot of peace of mind and it's going to set up your business for success. So then you're not tapping into your personal emergency fund. You can key into your business if you need it. And so that's probably the biggest piece of advice I'd say, to prepare yourself financially.
That's a great advice. All right, are you ready to get in some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. What does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means to me the ability to work on whatever projects that bring you joy. That's what it means to me.
What would you do if you could retire right now?
Okay, so if I could retire like right now, and money's not an issue, I would be I would be like a house remodeler. I know that sounds so weird, but I think that would be so fun. So I would do
like HGTV
Yeah,
style?
man, would that be the coolest?
We are the same person.
I know, I'm telling you. I think that's what I would do.
I bet it would be awesome. And you do furniture flipping too.
I do. I love it.
Which I've read about, which is also very HGTV.
I know, right? You should try it. I think you'd love it. It's a ton of fun. But yeah, that's what I would do.
And what would you do if you could never retire?
If I could never retire, it would always be serving people and helping people. I think it would be in the financial industry. I would be open to expanding it, but it would always be serving people in some capacity. And I know money would always be a bigger part of it. So I think it would be personal development with an emphasis on money.
And it sounds like you're already working in that field, so you've got your lifestyle design kind of down pat.
That's right. That's right. Do my best over here.
And if you could go back in time, what piece of financial or lifestyle advice would you give yourself in your early 20s?
In my early 20s, I would say to negotiate more. that was one of the things that I didn't do. And I see how much money I left on the table in business, in my careers. That's the one thing that I would do differently. It wouldn't even be avoid student debt. I think that was a very pivotal moment for me, but it would be to negotiate harder.
I love that. I think everyone can take that advice no matter where you are in your career or your life. You can always negotiate, and you should just ask and see what you can get.
You should. You never know.
Thank you so much, Whitney, for being on the podcast. Where can everyone go to find out more about you?
The best place is whitneyhansen.com and the Money Nerds podcast. I have a few blog posts on whitneyhansen.com that detail out how to become a financial coach and sharing some of my experiences and a little bit more tactical there. So definitely check those blog posts out and then tune into the Money Nerds podcast.
And we'll link to all of that in the show notes for this episode.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Whitney. This was an information-packed interview with Whitney Hansen, who shared all about how she built her six-figure money coaching business in just 4 years. But don't worry, you don't have to wait 4 years to make serious money as a money coach. Whitney earned the equivalent of her full-time salary while money coaching on the side in her first year of business. To check out the show notes for this episode, which includes links to resources mentioned in today's interview and where you can go to learn more about Whitney, go to 20free.co/episode 20. We are going to get to the power moves in just a minute, which will have general tips whether or not you are or plan to be a money coach. Stay tuned. But first, I want to recap 10 takeaways from this conversation specifically about money coaching. 1. Having a successful financial coaching business is not really about coaching. It's about marketing. If you can't get a consistent flow of coaching clients, you don't have a sustainable business. 2. You don't need to take expensive courses on how to coach before becoming a coach. Invest money in marketing courses instead, use your personal experiences to coach others, and learn by doing. 3. Here's what a money coach does. Helps people with habit change, helps people with the day-to-day of their financial life, and provides guidance around budgeting, debt, and savings. 4. Here's what a money coach does not do. Give investing, tax, or insurance advice. These are things you legally cannot do, so you should be careful when walking that line. 5. Be prepared to work on your clients' schedules. If you work with career professionals, you'll be working early in the morning, during the lunch break, and in the evening. 6. Start with one-on-one coaching, then scale to group coaching or coaching membership. There are things you will learn from one-on-one coaching that you don't want to test in front of a group, and you will get important testimonials from one-on-one coaching. 7. You don't have to have all the answers. If you don't know the answer to a question that a client asks, look it up and get back to them. 8. You don't need a financial background to be a money coach. It comes down to having experience with money and passion for teaching others. If you have both, you can be successful. 9. Focus on being profitable over being popular. Don't focus on vanity metrics like social media statistics. Focus on the activities that are actually earning you money. 10. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Focus on who your ideal client is and make sure that that ideal client is the one that has the means and desire to pay for your services. I want this to be more than just a podcast for listening to, so I'm making it a docast, where you're getting information from the podcast that you could take action on to create real outcomes in your life. I call these power moves. If you implement even one of these tactics into your life, you're taking a powerful step towards finding your freedom. What are some power moves we learned from this conversation? Here are 6. Power move number 1, enjoy the journey. Enjoying the journey is so important because you'll often find out that the destination is a bit of a letdown after you spend so much time and effort working towards it and imagining what it will be like. Whitney and I both experienced this with debt payoff. When she finished paying off her student loans, she felt like it was a bit of a letdown. This is why you have to enjoy the process, because the end goal will feel unfulfilling if you can't find joy in the journey. Similarly, I find it easy to be really results-oriented, where I'm working really hard towards a goal and don't take time to enjoy the journey or celebrate my achievements along the way. I've started enjoying the journey more because enjoyment in life is a goal that I want to pursue too. It's just an ongoing process instead of a milestone with a due date. Power move number 2, get an MBA for free. When Whitney decided to go back to school and get her MBA, she knew she didn't want to get into debt again like she did for her undergraduate degree. So she looked into a lot of different options. Here are a few. Join the military. Get a job that will pay for tuition reimbursement. Cash flow it by saving up money. Get graduate assistantships or scholarships. Work for a university. You can also get the education that comes with an MBA without the price tag by pursuing a no-pay MBA. This is where you create your own curriculum and take free online courses called Massive Open Online Courses from brand name universities. This way, you'll get all the knowledge you need to move up in your career or take your business to the next level for much cheaper than standard tuition. Power move number 3, be open to options. If you think there is only one way to do something, you could have an opportunity right in front of you and not even realize it. By being open to different ways of doing things, you could take advantage of creative solutions to problems. When it comes to money, there's no one right way to do things. It can feel like we have to get into debt to go to college, or to buy a house, or to get a car. But by being open to options, we realize that there are so many workarounds. You could get your college for free by working for the university or joining the military. You could do a house hack so someone else is paying your mortgage, or live in a tiny house that you could afford in cash. You could ride share with your neighbors, or join a commuting pool instead of buying a car. When you open up to options instead of assuming that there's only one way to do things, opportunities will present themselves. Power move number 4, build your parachute before you jump. Have you heard the saying, entrepreneurs are the ones who jump out of a plane and build a parachute on the way down? This doesn't resonate with all entrepreneurs. The truth is, that saying makes it seem like all entrepreneurs are crazy risk takers who figure it out as they go along. But the truth is, most entrepreneurs are very risk averse. You have to take calculated risks when you have a lot on the line. That's why risk management is a foundational concept in entrepreneurship. There's nothing wrong with wanting to build your parachute before you jump, and you're not alone in wanting to do so. If you're thinking about starting your own business, but you're not willing to wing it, it's a good idea to save a personal emergency fund as well as a business emergency fund. You might also consider building your business on the side as you continue to work your full-time job. Just like skydiving, entrepreneurship is much more enjoyable when you have a parachute in place before you take the leap. Power move number 5, your thoughts become your results. Your thoughts become your feelings, which become your actions, which become your results. So if you want to manage your results, you need to manage your thoughts. If your thoughts center around a scarcity mindset, it will be difficult for you to find an abundance of money or opportunity. Whitney uses a strategy called thought work, which is monitoring what you're telling yourself from day to day in order to break out of the scarcity mindset. She found that most of her thoughts were supporting a mediocre career and that she wanted more for herself. So to get different results, she had to think different thoughts. By separating what you want and what you believe from your negative internal chatterbox that tells you can't, you can achieve the results that you desire. Whitney tells her negativity that it's not making decisions in her life. It could be in the car with her, but it can't tell her where to turn. Take control of your thoughts, and you'll take control of your results. Power move number 6, money comes from value. Money comes from value, not from working more hours. This applies whether you work for yourself or for an employer. If you're self-employed, the activities that bring value to your clients are the ones that are going to get you paid. Working more hours in order to do tasks that don't move the needle forward is not going to generate more profit. If you're not working on the right tasks, it doesn't matter how long you're working. The same goes for if you have a job. You could spend 80 hours a week managing email and other administrative tasks, but if you don't do the activities in your job that create value for your company and your customers, you could get fired. If you only do the essentials and put your primary focus and best effort on those critical, value-filled tasks, you'll get recognized and promoted. That is the 6th and final power move for my conversation with Whitney Hansen about becoming a money coach. Do you need help figuring out what's next on your path to finding your freedom? Let's work together. As a money coach and lifestyle design expert, I help people reach their biggest money goals, like paying off debt, building up savings, and using their money to create their ideal life. As your money coach, I help you gain clarity about what freedom looks like for you, develop a strategy to get there, and overcome your money roadblocks on the path to financial and lifestyle freedom. People work with me because they want to finally feel good about their finances and have a stress-free plan to create a life they love. And they don't want to spend years using trial and error and disjointed advice from the internet to figure out how to make it happen. I provide the proven tools to improve your finances and accountability to make sure that you take the action needed to change your life. If you want to take the concepts you are learning on this podcast to the next level, visit 20free.co/moneycoaching to schedule your free 10-minute call with me. I can't wait to help you transform your life and find your freedom. Need someone to talk with about recent changes in your finances due to COVID-19? Let's connect on a free 10-minute coaching call and discuss how I can help. Schedule your call today at the word 20 free.co/money-coaching. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed to the Find Your Freedom podcast on whatever app you're using to listen to this episode. Do me a favor and also leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Go to 20free.co/iTunes to be redirected to the page on Apple Podcasts where you can leave your rating and review. I really appreciate it. If you think this episode would help someone you know, please share it with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast. My name is Becky. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at 20freeco and sign up for free resources and email updates at www.20free.co. That's the word 20, FREE.co. I'll talk to you next week on another episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast.